One of the things that bothers me as a Bulls fan is that I know full well I'm a diehard fan of a team that is owned and operated by a businessman who only cares about what helps the bottom line on their balance sheet and doing everything they possibly can to line their pockets without consideration of actually putting together a winning basketball team. And it bothers me because I became a Bulls fan as a kid watching the 90s dynasty and have stuck with this team through the good times and the bad times, although let's be real, it's been mostly bad times. And it's hard because you know you're never going to leave your favorite team. There is always going to be that sense of loyalty regardless of what happens, but it's by far and away the most frustrating thing about being a Bulls fan because you want to cheer for this team. You want to see them do well. You want to see them represent the city of Chicago well and one day, maybe just one day, win another championship. But we all know we have to put up with the crappy owners of this franchise who are still riding the coattails of the team's success from the 90s, and that regardless of how the team does, the fans will still continue to come out and show their support. Like, it really is maddening because on one hand, you want to support this team, but you also know that by supporting the team, you're directly playing into what the Reinsdorfs want. Your unwavering, unquestioning, loyal support despite the product of basketball being displayed on the court. And look, the reason I bring this all up is of course because I'm sure most of you have seen by now our guy Will Gottlieb over at CHGO, who actually came on the channel just a couple weeks ago. He reported that at the trade deadline, the Bulls passed on multiple offers to trade Alex Caruso, including one of which was in the top 10 in this year's draft, all because of a mandate from ownership at the trade deadline to push for the playoffs, which of course the Bulls were not able to do after getting eliminated from the play-in. And so I have a lot of thoughts on this report as well as the future on what this means for the Bulls and their fans. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, like every report, news article, media source, rumor, you always have to bear in mind these are just reports that have not been confirmed or backed up by the front office directly, and we'll never know specifically what was offered for Alex Caruso and whether this was more of an implied mandate from ownership to make the playoffs. But there are a few people that I trust and respect in the field of sports journalism in this industry and trust their reporting, and Will Gottlieb is one of them. Now, if you read the article, which I'll leave linked in the description in case you missed it, but at a high level, Will discusses the impending decision the Bulls are going to need to make as it relates to Alex Caruso's future, whether it means trading him or signing him to an extension before he hits free agency next summer. But leading into that decision, of course, is outlining what could have been or what could have been done as it relates to a potential trade for Caruso at this past season's trade deadline. Now, according to sources, which for the record, there have been a lot of reports of the Bulls getting offers for Caruso around the deadline, the Bulls turning down said offers, but it was more speculative in that people were saying, hey, they were good offers and the Bulls should have taken them. But now we actually got some more specifics as outlined by Will, in which the Bulls received multiple offers from multiple teams consisting of multiple protected first-round picks, one of which included a top 10 pick in 2024, but also adds that the Bulls took calls on Caruso but didn't make any. In other words, they weren't out actively shopping AC trying to get teams to bid on him. And of course, ultimately the Bulls declined all of those supposed offers because obviously Caruso is still with the team today. Now, why did they decline all of these offers? Well, maybe the picks weren't that good, or if multiple picks were included, maybe it also meant that they were taking on a bad contract in addition to it. But it appears the biggest reason is that the Reinsdorfs still wanted to compete and push for the playoffs, because trading Caruso, especially if you're getting future picks in return, would have all but closed the door on the Bulls making the postseason, even though they missed it anyway despite keeping Caruso. Now, you guys know where I've stood on this debate on whether to trade Alex Caruso. I've talked about it quite a bit on the channel. I get there's value in trading AC, but I also believe that Caruso is the type of player where he can fit on your team, whether you're competing now, rebuilding, or anywhere in between that. He can raise your ceiling as a contender, but he can also provide excellent leadership and mentorship to young players in a rebuild, which I cannot stress enough is so important to have that type of player when you're rebuilding. As I've said before, if you're going to trade Caruso because his value is so high and he's wanted throughout the league and on a very team-friendly contract, if you're going to trade him, you need to make sure you get the best return possible. And I said if it's something like a couple of second-round picks or even a heavily protected first-round pick where it's going to be a late first-rounder, then yeah, I would probably pass. Because AC is worth more than that to you, whether it be on the court and remaining with your team or in the form of a trade chip for a better deal down the line. That said, and I did a video on this all the way back at the trade deadline of 2023, where there were reports that the Bulls were seeking 2 to 3 first-round picks for Alex Caruso. If you get a haul like that, I said at the time, for a C, you take that all day in a heartbeat, because the value in getting multiple first round picks, whether it be in a situation where you're rebuilding or contending, is massive. Because if you go down the rebuilding route, you can obviously use multiple extra first round picks to build for the future. And then of course, if you desire to still compete now and try and contend, then you can use those first round picks as trade assets to bring in more win now talent, something the Bulls could have used given they don't have any future firsts available to trade until 2027. So if this report is in fact true and the offers were on the table for multiple first round picks for Alex Caruso, look, I love him, one of my favorite players on this team, but this is multiple picks for Alex Caruso, and they declined, and the Bulls are idiots, plain and simple. Like, when I go back and forth in this idea of trading Caruso and being in the should we trade him camp or not, it's always been under the assumption that the Bulls are going to trade him for a lousy offer, and the Bulls wind up with a couple of seconds for him. At that rate, you might as well keep him or extend him so you can lock him in for a long-term deal and wait to trade him until you get better offers down the line. But no, that's an offer of a lifetime for Alex Caruso. If you're able to get more than one first-round pick in a deal, you take that. Now, Will did mention the offers were multiple protected first-round picks, which, to be fair, can be enticing, but also not that enticing, depending on which team it's with. Take that lottery-protected first-round pick from Portland as part of the Larry Markkinen trade that the Bulls got. Sounded great at the time. All the Blazers had to do was make the playoffs and the Bulls would get that pick, but no. The Blazers couldn't make the playoffs with Damian Lillard, and now, of course, they're in a rebuild and one of the worst teams in the league, which likely means that first-round pick won't convey until it becomes a second-round pick by 2028. So we don't know if, in fact, these were heavily protected picks and heavily protected picks from teams that are currently rebuilding, which doesn't make the picks as valuable, both from a trade asset standpoint or using the picks to add talent in future drafts. I am curious which team this could have been that actually offered a pick in this year's draft that ended up becoming a top 10 pick. Like, the only teams I can really think of are the Rockets, the Grizzlies, and maybe the Hawks, who obviously didn't know it at the time that their pick would end up going number 1, because you would think a team that is willing to give up future assets for Alex Caruso is probably going to be a team that is looking to start competing more in the near term. A team like the Blazers, the Spurs, the Pistons aren't going to make sense to trade future assets for Alex Caruso. Caruso could fit on any of those teams in a rebuild, but those teams aren't giving up their immediate draft picks for him. And for the Rockets, a team that had the Nets pick, which they might have thought was going to be in the 8 to 10 range based on their standings, but ended up moving into the top 3. And then the Hawks, who were still trying to compete with Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, maybe they could have been looking to go in even further. Although, wait, actually, I take that back. The Hawks wouldn't have been able to trade this year's upcoming pick since their pick in 2025 is owed to the Spurs. So yeah, I'm guessing the Rockets or Grizzlies is who it could have been. Doesn't really matter at this point because the trade was never made. But it does make you wonder when you consider the Bulls could have had 2 lottery picks in this year's draft, albeit a weak draft class though. Now here's the thing, as it relates to Caruso's future with the Bulls, you can boil it down to this. They can trade him, which yeah, his value probably isn't as high as it was at the deadline, but it's still high enough that it can get you something in return. Or they extend him early before he hits free agency. Caruso cannot hit free agency and the Bulls let him walk for nothing. It would be front office malpractice to let that happen, where you had multiple opportunities to trade him, but you chose to keep him because of what he means to the organization. And then you let him become a free agent and he bounces. Literally the worst possible scenario for the Bulls. So if you're the Bulls and you really want to keep Caruso around, and you also want to keep him around as an eventual trade chip down the line, you extend him before he becomes a free agent. And I know a lot of people will say, well, why would Caruso want to do that? Why would he opt to stay with this team any longer than he has to? And why would he not want to go play for a contending team as his career winds down? Well, the Bulls actually have some leverage here, because as good as Caruso is, and yeah, he could in theory go wherever he wants and any team would want to pick him up, but the Bulls can offer him the most money. They can offer him at most a $78.8 million 4-year extension, a massive increase from his current contract. And knowing Caruso's injury history, knowing this is one of the first years where he was, for the most part, healthy for the full season, he's coming off one of his best seasons of his career with his improved offensive efficiency and elite level defense, knowing that you could capitalize on that and get a big payday, and then maybe worry about it down the line if you want to be traded. Securing a long-term deal when he's just turned 30 years old, that might be enough of an incentive to get Caruso to want to stay in Chicago. Because say you're Caruso and you turn down an offer at an extension because you'd rather test out free agency in 2025, and then you come out this season, you get injured, or you have a really down year, you just shot yourself in the foot because you're not going to get anything close to that kind of offer near $80 million that you would otherwise have signed in the summer of 2024. So for Caruso, you could be looking at it as peace of mind. Lock up a big contract now, it's guaranteed no matter what happens, and if things really start to go south in Chicago and you're unhappy, you request a trade. So yeah, I don't buy this notion that Caruso would never sign an extension with the Bulls when he can leave to go elsewhere next year. No, I'm sure Caruso is looking at this as security for a player who plays very hard and can go all out without having to worry about injuries affecting his financial future this season. Now, as far as what I think is going to happen versus what the Bulls should do, I do think the Bulls are going to extend Caruso. I don't know if it'll be at that max figure that they can offer him, but they will extend him at some point this season and have him around in either scenario where they're still trying to contend or they go rebuilding. But look, at the end of the day, this really isn't about Alex Caruso. Yeah, maybe the Bulls keep AC and they've got a hustle lockdown defender that is super fun to watch with this energy and emotion. Maybe they trade him and the Bulls get some good value in return. At the end of the day, I think what depresses me most about all of this is that big picture, at the big picture level of this organization, nothing is going to change. Not as long as the Reinsdorfs are still running things. Like, as much as we give this front office crap about being so incompetent or so complacent, we all know who's pulling the strings. AK might have very well wanted to trade Caruso, but Jerry said no, push for the playoffs. And it does make you question if AK will even want to remain in this role if ownership has their foot on his neck with how to treat the direction of this franchise. People say sometimes I'm a little too forgiving of AK, even though I do feel I have given him his fair share of criticism over the years, but part of it is because we know the Reinsdorfs make the big picture decisions. And how are you supposed to improve this team when you had a chance to acquire multiple first-round picks for a guy like Caruso and your owner is telling you, no, we want to make the playoffs this year for the extra revenue? For the Reinsdorfs, MJ did all the work for them back in the 90s. MJ gave them one of the biggest brands in sports, turned the Bulls into a global name, and they're just going to keep cashing those checks and living off of that in perpetuity without having to do anything. They've found a loophole in sports business where they can ride the coattails off a basketball icon and live off of that royalty for decades to come. It's frustrating, and what makes it even more frustrating is that it isn't going to be changing anytime soon. Because why would the Reinsdorfs ever sell this franchise when it's a money printing machine that will continue to generate revenue no matter how the team performs? I don't really know what else to say, and sorry I rambled on for so long. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.